I am joined today by Jared Olhoft. Jared is a Twin Cities technology leader with a passion for leveraging technology to create meaningful impacts. He has held leadership roles at a variety of companies, including Bluestem Brands, Yardstick, and most recently as the head of product engineering at BeBright. Jared, thank you so much for being in my orbit and for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm been dreading or excited, either way, both. Coming on here and doing this with you. I know it's going to be a great time though, and I've just benefited so much from all of the ones that you've done previously, and looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're now on the other side of the table here. So you're
Sure.
in the hot seat. You deserve it. I want to talk to you today about how your military experience and background has really informed your leadership style. Before we get into that, though, walk me through your journey from where you started and how you got into the professional world and to where you are today. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think the first kind of growing up that I did, the first real job was landing myself in the U.S. Marines. And so I served as an enlisted Marine, and my occupational specialty was actually a dispersing technician. And ended up falling into, instead of doing financial stuff, fell into a lot of kind of computer related tasks, desktop support, and some like financial audit stuff. The biggest thing I took out of the Marine Corps was actually just learning how much I love to learn. So I got to touch a lot of different topics and domains, and just really loved digging in and learning new stuff. When we left the Marines and came to the civilian world, kind of did a evaluation of whether I wanted to go into business, kinesiology, something like that, or technology. Technology won out. So I went to school for computer science while working full time in kind of entry level IT, and then have been through the software development stages of being a normal software engineer, falling into kind of team lead, senior engineer, principal engineer type roles in e-commerce, pharmaceuticals, benefits management. And then eventually, while at Bluestem Brands, started landing in leadership meetings with a very, very technical vernacular and not a lot of patience for business speak. And I just found, I found some gaps where I was like, it would actually make sense to go and do my MBA and try to learn the business stuff, accounting, finance, that was more challenging. Anyway, so I landed and did the executive MBA program at the University of St. Thomas here in the Twin Cities. And then shortly after that program wrapped up in 2020, I found myself leading product and engineering at Yardstick, a local VC-backed startup here in the Twin Cities. After a couple of years there, I landed in my current role at BeBright, private equity backed dental services organization. So few minute kind of quick run down the career path, if you will.
Well, thank you so much for your service. I want to make sure I say that first and foremost. I would love to know, why did you end up going into the military? What was the catalyst behind that?
Yeah. I wish I could say it was like, a lifelong goal. I strived to do this ever since I was a kid, was super squared away and like ROTC and activities. But no, really, I was kind of wild in my childhood. High school was a little rambunctious, got in some trouble here and there. I actually ended up dropping out of high school partway through my junior year, wandering a little bit aimlessly. But long story short, I eventually had some roommates that were great, pushed me to get my GED. And then I discovered or ran into a childhood friend that I grew up with. And he was home on leave from the Marine Corps, was doing super well. And it just kind of planted a little seed and an idea in my head, like, hey, maybe this is something that's for me. And so that was it. A few months later, I was standing in front of a recruiter's office at the Rosedale Mall here in Minnesota, kind of grabbing some pamphlets, not brave enough to actually like walk in and talk to anyone. Grabbed my pamphlets and off I went. And before I made it to my car, one of the recruiters chased me down. Was like, hey, hold on. Where are you going? And that was it. Within a few months, I was shipping off to boot camp.
And how soon after did you get on the straight and narrow? Were you still a wild child or?
No, I mean, that was immediate. The moment I decided that this was what I wanted to do and enlist, it was like a night and day difference. I was living at my dad's house again. So I'd moved back into him, and he had a roommate who was really into natural bodybuilding. And so I was this rail thin guy, runner type, but no strength, just The Marines did not seem like, if you saw me walking on the street, like, this guy's going to go in the Marine Corps. And so, yeah, Brian took me under his wing. It was just night and day. It's like, hey, I'm going to join the Marines. Brian's like, well, come to the gym with me every day. And so we started a workout routine, so I wasn't totally getting my butt kicked. And so, yeah, it was kind of a flip just switched. And it was like, this is what I'm doing. So
How long were you in the service for?
I was in for a 4-year enlistment, which is kind of like your standard enlistment for the Marine Corps.
Awesome. And you said you got to kind of cut your teeth on a number of things there, and you ultimately ended up walking down the road of technology. What would you say have you taken from the military in terms of a leadership philosophy, and what have you left behind?
I think anybody that's been in the military, and even those who have not been in it, but kind of are aware of the military culture, it's extremely authoritarian, right? There's a lot of yelling, a lot of being told what to do, and very little autonomy or choice, at least initially, right? And that of course is like by design. I don't remember the exact quote, but effectively, like, you're going to have a lot of leaders in your career, in your life over time, not just the Marine Corps. You have a lot of really good ones, a lot of really bad ones, and a mix of everything in between, right? And so it's really up to you to try to take and cherry pick the good and really adopt it, and leave behind the things that are bad or don't work for you, and just come up with like a hybrid approach for how you lead. And so I think coming right out of the Marine Corps, in the enlisted side, small unit leadership is super important, right? So everybody is a leader. In the Marine Corps, they say everybody is a rifleman, like everybody qualifies on the rifle range. And so it's all about, learning your baseline skills and being ready to step into a position of leadership if that position presents itself in all kinds of different scenarios that you face. And so, that looks like a fire team of four people together. One person's kind of in charge. That can rapidly change. You go up to a squad, a platoon, et cetera, right? Very hierarchical. And I think coming out of the Marine Corps and getting into my first real software engineering role in an agile environment with Scrum teams, right? Scrum-based development, it's very naturally kind of a same team size, similar dynamics, potentially depending on the size of company. And so I think naturally for me, kind of fell into, once the technical skills caught up, that small unit leadership was pretty easy and natural to jump into, especially even across like multiple kind of Scrum teams or offshore Scrum team plus onshore. I think that's the big thing that came out of the Marine Corps experience.
Yeah, I can imagine it must have been extremely difficult to go from that environment where you are being screamed at and you have very clear marching orders about what you're supposed to do, and there's no real ambiguity there. You screw up and you're out of line, and then to step into corporate America, and especially now where I think there is such an emphasis, and not wrongly so, but a much more bring your whole self to work, create a psychologically safe work environment. Do you ever find that it's frustrating insofar as you've had this really strict, very again, military philosophy of leadership kind of as your foundation, then you step into corporate America? Do you ever feel like corporate America is too soft, for lack of a better way of saying it? Do you ever worry that it's aired too far on the other side of the spectrum?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a challenging question because it can definitely go both ways. I think my gut reaction, like my initial sitting where I am today, is no, I don't think it is. When put under pressure, right? You talk about all these different personality frameworks. When put under pressure, like when push comes to shove, I'll probably revert back to a more authoritarian, like, hey, this is what has to happen and we're going to do it. But I think that for me, then I have to consciously kind of tend more towards like trying to be adapting with the times, right? In terms of cultural sensitivities and just leaving behind all kinds of things that just don't have a place in society or the workplace nowadays. Yeah. And so, yeah, to a degree, potentially it swings too far, like as the pendulum always does. But I do think it's like a healthy exercise just to bring that consciousness and sensitivity into all of the situations that you face professionally. So yeah, I don't know that I would say it's gone too far in most of the situations that I've faced in my career so far in the civilian world.
You had mentioned when you got into the military that you really fell in love with learning, that you actually learned how to learn in a lot of ways. I'd love to dive more into that. So let's talk about your MBA, because that's something that's also very unique about you, Jared, is that a lot of technology leaders are not out there going to develop their business chops in a formal education type of scenario. Walk me through what made you decide to go get the MBA as opposed to buying a business book, and do you think it was worth pursuing the degree?
Yeah, so I'll cut straight to the chase. Yes, it was absolutely worth it for me. I was really fortunate. We have great support if you have served in the US military to have uh, various types of college assistance available post service. And so I uh, immediately leaving the service around 2006, started going to school full time in the evenings and used the Montgomery GI Bill, or a version of it that I had access to pay for that schooling. And uh, right as I was graduating, so I did about 5 years worth of credits in 3 years, ever the overachiever and just striving to get things done. And right at the end, a new bill was introduced that doubled or tripled the reimbursement rates for college,
Oh.
but it wasn't retroactively applied. So I was kind of bummed, to say the least. Use stronger language than that. Wrote some letters to local government and state, like, come on, what's happening? And then walked away because there's really nothing you can do about it. But fast forward a decade, and I was at the gym with a friend who worked at the VA, and we were talking about that. And he goes, well, no, they passed an amendment. And if you finished your benefits, you probably have at least 1 year of the new program available to you. And so I was like, well, did not know about it. So I looked into it and I had about a year of benefits left. That was going to expire in 2018. This was 2016. I found, the executive MBA program at Carlson School of Management at the U of M, and the executive MBA program at the University of St. Thomas. And St. Thomas's kind of executive MBA philosophy, the types of adjunct faculty and stuff that they had just spoke to how I learned more, which is a more hands-on, peer cohort group. You learn as much from your peers as you do from the content. And yeah, so that led me to the executive MBA program.
Do you feel like you personally need to have an external third party who holds your feet to the fire? And I don't say that like as if you're unique or weird in that way. I feel the same way. I will go and hire coaches to teach me how to do something, because if I'm left to my own devices, no way in hell I'm getting off the couch to do it. So I'm curious, do you rely on, and is that something you celebrate, that going and seeking out and paying for and enlisting in a formal program to achieve what you want in your learning and development?
Yeah, short answer is yes. But there's a sliding scale. It's actually, as you're saying that, I'm trying to think of my response. It's a little bit of an interesting paradox, because I'm very much do it yourself in like many aspects of my own learning. And it goes to personal hobbies, sports pursuits and passions. I've done Ironman and trained for powerlifting and just all kinds of stuff over the years. And so when I get personally interested or like truly like inspired by something, ask my spouse, watch out, like it's going to be hard to like hold me back. I'm going to go and figure it out, maybe on my own, and maybe tapping into other experts and professionals that can kind of coach me along. But in general, I'm going to default to like, I got this, I can figure it out. However, for these bigger, broader things, when I find that I've got that gap and I'm like, man, I'm sort of at an impasse or I'm doing this poorly, then yeah, you definitely, tapping into that executive MBA program as an example and just kind of giving up your will to be along for the ride and let those experts bring you along and do what's best is absolutely an excellent thing. The second part of that is I'm not a natural like networker. I think that's the biggest benefit I gained out of the executive MBA program and executive coaching that comes with it, is being able to reach out to others. It's, I think, kind of how we met, Lauren, was like an unnatural but learned openness to make these types of connections, because they're incredibly beneficial, and you never know what opportunity or kind of what strengths and benefits will come out of that, for what you're facing. So by default, I want to do it on my own, but in time, and maybe it's with age, I've started to learn to lean into those pockets of expertise to help you get to the next step or achieve the goal that you're staring down.
Well, and for the MBA program and your newly, developed networking chops, I'm very grateful as a result. Like you said, we're now talking here today, and we've talked, often in the recent past, which I'm so grateful for. In terms of do-it-yourself learning, what are some of the things that you gravitate towards? I know you're the similar to me, the one who has a nightstand stacked with books and reading at least 4 or 5 at a time. In addition to reading, what are some of the avenues that you continue to learn in the DIY fashion?
So in terms of like professional development, I feel very, very strongly. I've probably got dozens of quotes captured in some note-taking tool somewhere about the need to, continue to push yourself out of your comfort zone, which is, of course, like by definition, very uncomfortable, unnatural. It means change. I think this actually is modeled in a lot of military service. I love being able to kind of dig into new things on a periodic basis. So in the Marine Corps, you're almost always doing a new type of assignment every 6 months or a year, new duty stations every couple years. And so being able to be exposed to new things, which makes you uncomfortable, forces growth, right? So number one, I'm, whether I like it or not, I'm pursuing new things. That's always going to drive and push growth because you got to pick up new stuff. Like, of course, military training, you go to boot camp, you show up, that is your life. You have absolutely no other choice. And you are living and breathing whatever they throw at you every second of every day that you are there. However, there is a lot of self-discipline to take the tools that have been given and to continue to read and learn from them. In the day-to-day professional development, I don't know that I've ever relied on a company to provide me the training that I need, but rather the inspiration or the direction, whether it's a technology framework or a language or a methodology for running development teams or even like operating a company. Those give you kind of the North Star or the topics to dig into. And then the rest has always been kind of like myself, just knowing it's the right thing to do, which is to learn that more in depth and then learn through doing, right? In the day and age that we face right now, it's just fascinating the tools that we have at our disposal with a lot of the generative AI. And so I'm constantly having conversations and just digging into with ChatGPT and various other tools like Claude, Perplexity. So yeah, the ability to learn topics, to find credible sources with this conversational format, like we are just at the beginning of these super, super fascinating times. It's going to be amazing to see what's possible, how we learn, in the next 2 to 5 years, even. I think it's going to be fundamentally different. I would just say, like, there's a risk with technologists, with myself, people who love to learn. Not everybody is like that, and not everybody is comfortable being uncomfortable and being pushed out of that comfort zone or that bubble of competence. And so I've learned to be really careful with the change I'm introducing within my org or within my teams. You can only ask people to learn so much. You can't necessarily expect them to be as obsessive as you. And so finding that strategy and consistency at work is absolutely critical for me and for the teams and the technologies that I'm building. Knowing your people and who you can challenge or who's maybe more ready to adapt and go a little bit more above and beyond in terms of outside of that comfort zone and learning new things is all super critical to just know in your one-on-ones how you can push them or point them in the right direction of new knowledge. That said, I'm kind of slowing down, if you will, at work. And so I have a lot of personal passions as well that let me just run my creative juices. And that's things like learning how to cultivate house plants and grow gourmet mushrooms in a closet at my house was my last winter's project, right? And so there's all kinds of fascinating domains that I can scratch that itch of curiosity other than the shiny object syndrome that you might bring, or we see many technologists bring into their work environments. So
Well, one of the things that came to mind as you were talking about, again, scratching that itch and cultivating a continuous learning ethos for yourself was around self-care. And I have a question that I want to formulate around both self-care and loyalty when it comes to what you learned in the military. So I've always imagined that you learn a great deal of loyalty. You learn how to say, yes, sir, and when they tell you to jump, how high. Do you learn self-care? That's my first part of this question is, do you learn how to take care of yourself and not just to follow orders? I guess, do you learn self-care when you're in the military?
Yeah, that is a tricky question. I think I would say you're given the tools about self care. The time that I was in, kind of wartime, deployment frequency, you have a lot of pre deployment, kind of psychological, say, self care type things, post deployment care. But I don't know that I, at least personally, actually like really understood or adopted a lot of those practices. So I probably, from a psychological health perspective, not so much. Like coming out of the military is still super driven, and I stumbled into what I would say self-care with pursuing Ironman triathlon training and these very, I'll say in hindsight, when you have a family and kids, very selfish pursuits that are, yes, they're helping you kind of like be out on the road running for dozens of miles or biking for 100 miles, and you're just able to sit and like be in that pain cave, so to speak. So that was a form of self-care for me, but potentially not great for you as you engage with the community, the family around you, if that makes sense. And I think over time, though, for sure, as you progress in your career and have more and more responsibility, the stressors are absolutely, increasing, if not linearly, even more so, right? And so there's a lot of healthy self-care that I have learned over the years to be able to prioritize family or the things that are important outside of professional pursuits in a balanced way, right? And I call that self-care, right? Being able to know that balance, especially for someone that can be very obsessive about certain things, which might be work related goals.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you did, like you said, you eventually learned be it through the channel of Ironmans, which I cannot even imagine doing. That sounds the antithesis of self-care to me. But I understand you, like you said, you got a lot of time to spend up here working things out. The reason I sort of tethered the two, self-care and loyalty, is that again, my understanding of when you're in the military is you're there to give of yourself. You give of your body, your time in service of your country. How did you have to either modify that or rail against it or lean into it when you entered the corporate world where loyalty can be good to a company until it isn't? And what I mean by that is until the role, the management, the culture, the direction of the company, financial or otherwise, no longer serves you and your family. Did you have to modify your position on loyalty and serving a higher power as you entered corporate America?
I don't know that leaving the military or even when I was in the military, there's a certain, this might come off too strong. There can be a certain blind loyalty, right? That patriotism where as I was serving, it was kind of like, this is what I'm doing. This is the job. You're deploying overseas and I'm not being very philosophical about the greater picture of like, why is America in this country and why are we doing what we're doing, right? I think that's come for me personally later in life here as I reflect back and look removed from the situation, go, oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with those types of policies or things nowadays. Like, what would I face today? So, so I'd say like in that regard, there was the job to be done and it was what I was doing. And so there is that loyalty, right? That patriotism and I would say now almost a blind loyalty in many cases. Did I take that with me into kind of like my first jobs, career steps out of the military? I think I stepped into, the civilian world with a healthy view and balance of like, this is a job. And like, I don't personally owe like a devotion necessarily to that employer, right? It is a business relationship and it is mutually serving as it should be. And there will be periods at time where things change on either side and the relationship will evolve, it will terminate, you go to a new position, you get let go, there's all kinds of things. And so I don't know if I was, really had this invested loyalty, I could see there being a lot more kind of emotions with those changes. But I do think I've taken a balance so that kind of loyalty didn't necessarily come into the institution from the Marine Corps into my my path in the civilian world, if you will. I don't know if that made sense.
No, it did. I think that's wonderful because it is a business. I mean, I think that a business can be orienting towards a mission that everybody can get behind, and that's great. But where I see a lot of people get into trouble is when they believe that that their corporation owes them indefinite employment, and so I think that's great. I actually think that's your answer was surprising in that I thought that would be a struggle for you. My two last questions for you today. My second to last one being, do you wish that more people kind of came to technology in the kind of circuitous route you did because of how much you can draw from different sources of inspiration into what can be a very highly analytical, very narrow channel in a lot of ways? I don't know if you noticed that in other peer technology leaders.
Yeah, what's interesting, it might be a little bit of a some type of cognitive distortion though, because maybe it's because of my background. Many of my kind of closest friends that have come out of being coworkers together in technology, software engineering, or what have you, have probably sort of non-traditional backgrounds slash not computer science degrees or no college degree at all. And so I can think of them, I could call their names out, which they wouldn't appreciate, but so I do think like many people that I'm close to that have come out of professional relationships that are now today friends, maybe have a similar non-traditional path into technology as I've had. But I do absolutely think that getting experience outside of just deep tech, right? Like that depth of knowledge is absolutely important, becoming more just well-rounded individuals personally, and yes, in the professional sense. If you're a core technologist that's just been living and breathing it all the way till today, look for the opportunities to reach outside your comfort zone that aren't in the technical realm. I worked at Room and Board for about a year. That was my first time in that kind of retail e-commerce space. One thing I really appreciated starting there is they have kind of or at the time, a policy and program where all new employees will spend a day in different departments. And so I got to do a day riding along and helping deliver furniture, right, throughout the Twin Cities. And you're like actually hands-on seeing how this works, or working in the warehouse to see how the scanning and pulling works of these large items. So, but yeah, lots of different ways to gain that breadth of experience outside of technology, even if you've been a deep technologist to date.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think a general theme we've touched on a lot today is getting out of your comfort zone, how important that is in lots of different ways. And I've called you before, I think the Renaissance man. You continuously pushed yourself in lots of different areas out of your comfort zone. My last question for you today, Jared, is what do you wish people understood about the military, about what somebody in your shoes has gone through? Again, just to cast a light on this type of experience a lot of people will never have.
Yeah. Man, it's really hard to give like a single good soundbite of that. I think, right? Because it depends. That's the easy answer. Well, it depends. That's always you can't be wrong there. So I am, I don't know, 20, almost 20 years removed. So I have a lot of uh, time to look back on it and have interacted with other veterans from different stages from the same period as me, from different branches. We're people, and people are complex. And so there's a broad spectrum of where we've all ended up in terms of at least the veterans that I've interacted with in a professional sense to date on my journey. And I think there's a really varied set of experiences that we have all faced. So veterans coming from the military, and this is not just military people, but we all have different ways of learning. We all have different life experiences. How certain events or activities that we faced in the military, like even though it was the same situation, we all may have received that in different ways. And that goes all the way to things like whether you've had PTSD or different traumas kind of triggering different things, or you've grown out of those types of situations. It's really varied. And so I guess, taking a step back today, I would just say the thing to understand about a veteran, about their military experience, is that it can be quite varied. And so they may be in many different places. It's not a one size fits all. Oh, this guy was a Marine and she was a Marine. And especially like I'm thinking about you're screening resumes. Oh, they were both Marines. They must be in this bucket, right? Like there's just this breadth and depth of knowledge and experience that any military veteran member is going to bring with them to their current, and that there's probably more of a story to be told behind each of that, and plenty to understand. And I think there's probably great value in all of those stories for the person that you're talking to or whatever, that veteran.
Yeah. Well, speaking of stories, I can't thank you enough, Jared, for sharing your story today. Leadership as a topic is very multifaceted. And so I'm very grateful that we had a chance to look through this particular lens and also your particular lens of how you've gone from the wild, rambunctious child that you were to leading a technology organization. And so thank you for sharing your story today on Cupalo Conversations and just more generally, just for being in my orbit, like I said.
Well, it is the pleasure and the privilege is all mine. I am just so honored to be able to jump on and have this conversation with you. And I learned so much from you and all the efforts that you're making in the space. So thank you.